For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. It is Monday, December 12th, 12/12, and we are broadcasting live on 105.3 FM New Orleans and the United Public Radio Network. We are also live on Parapost Network, and yeah, it's been a crazy. I apologize that I've missed the last few weeks. I have had a crazy life, with just winding down the year, and um, some things happened in my personal life that I couldn't make it. So I'm back. I do have so many things planned for next year as well. I'm really excited because I'm changing the structure on how I do a lot of things, and it's definitely going to be more organized because I have learned so much in the last 12 months on this show and with all of my guests. Before I forget again, I want to special thanks to Carnation for sponsoring my show. And this is officially the last week of fall. So I know it's already snowing in some areas of the world and the U.S. So next week, of course, is Yule for those of us that celebrate the changing of the light and the dark parts of the year. Which is interesting because my guest tonight, I'm super excited actually. He contacted me earlier, and we have talked quite a few times in the past, and on his travels. Fascinating person. I want to welcome Dave Petrella. He is an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, Oak Island theorist, and he has traveled all over the United States, the 50 states, and most of Canada, doing his research and learning about the different traditions across the land. Dave was one of the first theorists to present in the new Oak Island War Room in June of 2017. And he also worked on the island that summer in 2018 as well. He offers services in tropical astrology, health, and spiritual guidance. So welcome, Dave. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me, Trish.
Me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So how have you been? It's been a while.
Yeah, I've been great. To give people a quick recap here, I moved out of Texas. I was living in Texas for about 2 years basically through all of COVID, and then June 30th, I left on a very long road trip, which I thought was only going to be maybe 45 days, and it turned into a lot longer than that because I had a lot of research to do. So I went through the Southeast United States. I was researching the mound builder civilization, essentially, which is the earthen mounds that you find kind of all east of the Mississippi River, even up into Canada a little bit. It's a very broad area. And then I continued on up to northeast to New England, where actually I'm from originally, and I did more research on the stone chambers. There's a lot of these really mysterious stone chambers up in the New England area. It's very strange. I mean, the entrances are only a couple feet high, oftentimes, and most of them are oriented to solstices and equinoxes. So there's a lot of mystery behind that, and I grew up there, so it's in my backyard. But being able to go out there and actually research it for the first time, not the first time, but 2018 was probably the first time I went out there, taking measurements, getting a feel for the energetic field. I bought an EMF meter for this trip specifically, which is an electromagnetic frequency meter. If people are not aware of what that is, it's often used in paranormal investigations as well, but you can use it even in your house, just to make sure you're not, blasting yourself with Wi-Fi or you got stray electricity flying everywhere. So it's a really useful tool. Then after that, I started with the LDS story, which is formerly known as the Mormon religion. Joseph Smith, who they say is the prophet, was born in Vermont. And I started in Vermont and I did the entire church history trip all the way through Missouri and then actually in through, kind of the Midwest there through Kansas, through the plains. And then I continued later on up through Wyoming and into the Pacific Northwest. Well, Salt Lake City, of course, which is where kind of the story sort of ends. Because of Temple Square, that's where Brigham Young took the rest of the saints after Joseph Smith was killed in Nauvoo, Illinois. So it was a very long trip. It was actually turned out to be 100 days, Trish. We haven't talked in a little bit, but I was on the
I
road for
know.
100 days, guys, and a lot of camping. Amazing things happen, revelations, all kind. You just never know what you're gonna get. Every morning that I woke up, I just had to be ready for whatever the day was gonna bring. It was always different. I'm happy to say most of the days were really positive and it was good energy. But there's a couple days there that where it's for instance, I was camping in Pennsylvania, and there was some really dark energy in the campground. It was something, I think, a very ancient spirit, and it was pervasive. I mean, the minute I pulled into the drive there, I felt a dark kind of energy. So,
So
but it's
it's
been great.
funny you mention that because hey, Charles Rudd from Texas
Oh, hey,
and
Charles.
Nikki. Um,
Hey, Nikki.
Thank you all for joining us. What I was going to say is it's interesting you mentioned Pennsylvania. I don't think we talked about this because um, so when I was on Chasing Prophecy, they're all located. My co-hosts were all located in Pennsylvania as well, and um, another couple that are hosts um, on the network on Horsefly Chronicles, they also live in Pennsylvania. And so, and then I have quite a bit of relatives in the New England area, and I moved from New York, of course. So, what's interesting though about that, you say that's a dark energy. Almost 100% of the time, and I'm not even kidding you, it's the
Hmm.
times that I tune into their show, it's the times that something is going on in Kansas, like really dark, where people start reporting UFOs or cryptids or things like that, and then there's a lot of deaths or crime and things like that. Every single time, it mirrors what's going on in Pennsylvania. So I find that really interesting. And parts of New England and like some parts of Canada even. So,
Oh, totally. Yeah, the way I think of it, really, it's a world grid. So you've got ley lines. Of course, astrology comes in behind everything. Of course, that's what I
mhm.
teach in some astrologer. But when you have what are called the daily transits, which is where planets are on a specific day at a specific time, that's affecting the entire Earth, and it
Right.
affects individuals differently depending on on your own birth chart, which is, of course, where the planets were at the moment that you were born. So those two interact with each other. It also interacts with what I call, I guess, the Earth timeline, and it interacts with the local land, and the local land has different types of energy based on the rock structure, the bedrock, if there's magnetic rocks and things based on what's happened there in the past.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of things. Sometimes it can be projected by the people that are living there.
Oh
So
yeah.
when I know you're aware of that too, but when I go into these areas, I don't know which one it's going to be. And sometimes it takes me a few days to be able to feel where is this energy actually coming from. I went to Kecksburg too, Trish, which is of course really well known for the UFO crash. This
Where's
was
Kecksburg?
yeah, Kecksburg's Pennsylvania is just south of
Oh.
Pittsburgh, and it's where there was a fairly well known UFO crash. Supposedly, some people think it was part of the Nazi bell. If you've heard of that before, Die Glocke, I believe is what it's called. They claim it went through a time machine or a portal and ended up in Pennsylvania, across a large span of years. But
Right.
and so I never have an idea of what to expect when I go into these places. The one thing that's important is just to make sure that you have your own protection. Have your own shield up, be able to kind of feel through the spirit world and see what feels right to you, what doesn't, and trust your intuition. But at that particular site, I actually was, my feeling was that, oh, this might be a little bit weird. I don't really go looking for things like that anymore, but I was passing right through it. So I said, yeah, of course I'm gonna go. In a worst case scenario, 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And I know when I feel it, and then I would leave if I had to. But I was standing right there in front of that memorial up on the hill there. There's a UFO craft that looks like an acorn, essentially, was the description. And it's a memorial to the occurrence. And I was standing there. I'm like, I actually feel fine. I actually feel pretty good. But when I got up on the ridge and I was headed out of town, I did sense something in the general area. Whether it's an energy or a presence, I don't know. When I was looking out the ridges and the mountains and stuff, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see how this would have happened here. So that was just one day, and you really want to see it in different weather patterns too. You want to
Hmm.
make sure that you're actually in the same state of consciousness when you're perceiving it, because that will also alter your perception. So it's a very very involved process, as you know. You have to be aware, be open, but also go in with protection for sure.
People don't realize even that food can 100%, especially around like full moons and stuff, can influence or manipulate your intuition as well, especially modern day food, um, that's processed and things like that. That's why a lot of times animals naturally fast around different planet or moon cycles.
Oh, have you seen that actually in practice, Trish? Have you seen animals doing that?
Yeah, well, my own, and I know that I 100%, um, my intuition is so off if say the full moon lands on like a holiday or something where people, you know, aren't working and eat a lot and things like that. Yes, it absolutely can render my awareness,
Hmm.
my intuition, everything depending on what it is I'm eating or drinking. Or there's even some religions and cultures that won't do things like boil water. Um, they will not eat or drink anything that has been boiled in water around a full moon because it changes. Um, what's the word?
It
Like
probably
the
changes.
ionic structure of the water, literally the energy of the
Oh,
water.
okay. And what I would say immediately is, for me, the reason for that right off the bat is the fact that the moon rules Cancer, and Cancer is a water sign.
Well, yeah.
The moon only rules one sign, which is Cancer. The moon and the sun
Hmm.
have each one sign. The sun rules Leo. But yeah, I mean, even the tides and everything, the moon is very closely connected with water. And also, you know what, Trish? Honestly, since you bring that up that way, my other thought is that it's probably going to also restructure the water in your body.
Hmm.
Which, there's a question is how much can you actually do about that if it's some kind of a reaction in physics,
Right.
or metaphysics. So, and the other thing about the moon too is that, according in astrology, the way I teach it, the moon is also that's actually considered a planet. It's not considered a moon. It's far too large for the classification generally being a moon. But in astrology, it occupies what's called the first heavenly sphere, the first heaven. Sometimes it's called the first lady of the sky. And the thing about that is that it's the closest body to the Earth. We know that. We all know that, and so it has a lot of influence. And even just general physics, the closer the body is to the other body, then you have a lot of influence and a lot of exchange. And then the other thing about it is that the orbit is very fast. It's about, what, 2.5 days per sign of the zodiac. So that means that just when you're getting comfortable with something, you're like, okay, I'm getting into this pattern. It just rips that away from you and it shifts signs. And depending on how that's going to interact with your birth chart, you're going to feel that. So
Oh,
always,
and
Always be ready for the unexpected.
Each planet when that the moon is in also affects different body parts, and people don't realize that. So like
That's
it's
correct. Yep.
not safe to have surgery on certain, if you're going to have like, I don't know, it's common for people to have like appendicitis or gallbladder surgery or
Hmm.
things like that. When and then there's other ones like this past full moon. I'm a Gemini, so the full moon, it was in Gemini, and that correlates with your fingers and your throat, like throat chakra, things like that. So everyone around me said that they, and I'm sure this time of year also with the air being dry and stuff as well,
Yeah.
but had throat issues. They're more likely to injure that if they do a lot of singing or yelling or whatever people do. And but I kept cutting my fingers, and I'm like, what is? And then I remembered that, that directly correlates with Gemini. So
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, I actually just did an entire show on astrology and the body with my co-host Karen Holton. We have a podcast called Aliens and Astrology. If you guys want to check that out, it is on my YouTube page. I think we'll have a link posted, but it's easy to find. It's just my name, Dave Petrella. You'll find my page. Anyway, I go over the entire thing, and even a lot of astrologers they're not aware of that. They don't really talk about the human body a lot, and in fact, it goes so far that it's absolutely shocking, shocking how
well, and I don't know why it's not taught. It should be taught
I don't
in
know.
medical school,
Oh
you
yeah,
know, because that's how serious it is. Like,
yeah,
and people say, "Oh
well,
no, that's this woo-woo stuff." No,
yeah,
it's not. You can actually, it's scientific based. Like you can, it's just astonishing to me that nobody takes it that serious because it affects everything.
oh yeah, yeah. And I'm before I started with astrology, I'm a scientist, guys. So when I came into that, I actually didn't want to do astrology. It was put in my hands as what I believe is a responsibility to the earth and to teach it correctly. And I would never have done it if I couldn't literally basically put my hands in front of my eyes and get it like 99% accurate every time. And then the 1% that I missed it would be my fault. It's not the chart. It's actually just me, with something. But the point is that I looked at it as a science from the very beginning because I've been trained in sciences. I studied biology since I was 10 years old, and so I had the proper scientific method already in place. So when my friend, actually Santos Bonacci, he's an absolute genius, guys. Go to his YouTube channel, Mr. Astrotheology. He's pretty much essentially the number one flat Earth guy on the planet right now. He's a
What's
world
his
class.
name?
His name is Santos Bonacci, Bonacci. And he's world class astrologer. He also teaches about human sovereignty and the corruption of the world and the ruling families and all this stuff. He's just absolutely brilliant. I actually learned the basics of astrology from him in 2015. And the thing that happened was I gave him a chance because actually the information that he had about the Eastern teachings of the human body, Eastern medicine, and also about how astrology is in the body and about the sacred spinal cord fluid and all these topics that you never hear about in the West, not even one time at all. For me, I'll speak for myself. And then what I did was he had some suggestions about videos to watch if you enjoyed his video, and I said, "Wow, yeah." He actually completely changed my life. And in the side column were videos about astrology. And the reason I gave him a chance was because he completely knocked it out of the park with the esoteric side of biology. And so I already trusted him, and I said, "All right, if someone like this who brought this to me, which I've been waiting for like my entire life. This was when I was maybe about 26 or something like that. I found this on YouTube. I said that yeah, if he brought that to me, I'm gonna watch every video that he's done, and that's kind of what I do. Is if I really build trust in someone, I'll watch all of their work. I want to know because if you got a good bearing on that, chances are you probably have a good bearing on some other stuff too, and it makes sense to like pay attention to that person, even out of respect too. So I watched the astrology videos and then I just took it into the field with me. I did my own birth chart. I did my friends' birth charts. Then I started to do birth charts for people that I didn't know. And I was able to place it in the proper sign every time. It made sense. It completely fit. And I actually was essentially forced to accept the system because it was scientifically sound. It
Mhm.
wasn't my opinion, or what. I didn't do it because I wanted to. I'm not
Right.
like trying to be. I'm not even. I'm very straight, actually, very straight down the center kind of person. Even though I go into all the fields, but I'm not trying to be counterculture. I'm not trying to be cool. I'm not trying to get attention. I'm doing it because it's a science. It's actually a science. It was not. It's not taught as a science now. It's taught as a pseudoscience, and people know it from newspapers and horoscopes and all this stuff. But actually, it was called the science of light in ancient Egypt, and between ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia, the system of tropical astrology was developed. And it was taught as a science because it's all mathematics. In fact,
Mhm.
it's actually all numbers. If you really want to break it down to how it actually works, it's all angles and
Yeah.
numbers. And I
Numerology.
don't, oh yeah, and I don't have to do any kind of inference. It's all right in front of me. I look at the number, I look at the degree, and then I tell the person what that means. And that's all it is. It's a system.
So, an interesting thing, which numerology came into my life, of course, out of nowhere, intuitively a long time ago. But I didn't know at the time how to decipher it. And then once I start, people talk about seeing numbers on billboards and license plates and all these street signs and all of these things. Well, eventually, I realized that those were actually certain I mean, obviously, it was signs that I was supposed to pay attention to intuitively in my life, but they were degrees and angles, and it was a specific, if I see a certain number and I see it next to a specific letter or another number or something like that, I know which direction whatever it is that's trying to send me a message is coming from, or what's coming up. And that's actually saved my life, actually, in a lot of cases. And I know there's probably tons of psychics and mediums and stuff out there that do that, but don't even realize they're doing it, because they haven't actually gotten it down to a science yet, quite literally. Um, because before I would have just thought that was my intuition, that was it's the same concept of people with like lottery numbers and things like that. Um, everything's numbers, everything's probability and patterns and sequences and things like that. um, and so when you can read that, then it makes it much less confusing, I think. um, as far as like grid points and things like that on a map.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, when what I teach the Earth as, like, I teach it as it's a created system. And when you have the whole universe in front of you, this is one segment, and it's a created system with specific laws in it. So basically, though, if you got the laws in place, I'll just start with of course astrology, the science of the solar system, the master science. Um, and by the way, there's 12 signs, so today is is really perfect. It's kind of last minute, but I'm so happy to join you because it's 12
And
12.
the 12th
It's
month, 12th
Yeah,
day.
and that's my Instagram name is Dave Petrella 12 because it's the 12 signs. But the thing about it is that it's really you have to understand it is that in order to give any kind of system, when I say system, I'm talking about the Earth system, which includes the Earth plus all the planets and stars and everything, especially, well, the stars that are within the what I would call the 10th sphere. Anything inside of that is part of the Earth system. Um, and it's anchored with the sun, of course, because the sun gives light and power to everything in our solar system. And all the stars, a lot of them supposedly, maybe even most of them, are supposed to have planets. Well, this is just one of those systems, and in this system, it's in terms of the mental world, it's base 12 because that's 12 signs. And in the model of cosmology that I teach, the 12 signs of the zodiac actually exists in what's called the eighth sphere, or the eighth chakra. The spheres and the chakras of the human body are actually equivalent. So when you're talking
Mm.
about the stars and your mental world and the entire zodiac, it actually exists above your head, like right about here, above the seventh chakra and the eighth. And that's also why we see the one that comes to mind the clearest for me is actually the Virgin Mary, is that she has actually like a crown of stars, and it's not like on her head, it's actually like a little bit above her head. You see the stars are sitting up there, because that's where all of the mental energy comes in through the eighth chakra, through the mental sphere, and through the eighth sphere up there. Um, and so all of the zodiac actually exists up here, technically. And then when
No,
you come down, I just want to add one more thing, Trish. When you come down
oh,
to
yeah.
the physical world, which is the human body, that's base 7. And that's where the 7 chakras come in. And that's the 7 traditional planets. And then on top of that, all the 12 signs are also physically in your body, starting with Aries up here. And you mentioned Gemini. Gemini is actually where the body actually truncates. So right here at the base of the neck, that's where it splits out into 2, and it includes all of your arms and the bottom part of your throat. That is Gemini, and that's the reason for that. And that's also why when you get to Gemini during the year, the season of Gemini, which is roughly May 21st to June 19th or 20th, somewhere in there. It's the reason that it's the other reason it's a dualistic sign is because it's actually branching the spring season with the summer
Hmm.
season. So the spring is on this side, that's one of the twins. The other twin is on this side, reaching out to summer. So you got Gemini there at the top saying, "Oh, I'm going to bring these two together with the two principles," and that's where you kind of get
Yeah,
that
it's
from.
right
But
in the middle.
exactly, exactly. But all of the signs are also in your physical body. It's all integrated. It's hard to say it's one thing or another, but the easiest way that I teach it is that the physical world the number is 7, the spiritual world the number is 12, 12/13.
Now, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What is your opinion or thoughts on the 13th sign being, oh, is it Ophiuchus?
Ophiuchus, yep.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
And
Ophiuchus, of
like the
course, is
Mayan theory of, even 13 months.
right. Well, it is a very important topic, and I want to set this straight. I've spent a lot of time with this. There's a lot of things I can say about it. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. The first part is that 12 and 13, they go together. It's like kind of like a pairing. 12 is kind of like the last step. Um, it's kind of like the completion step, and then 13 is the result of the completion. So when you hit 13, there's no more work that has to be done. You have ascension, or you have the mastery. That last step is the step where you relax. And it's the same thing with 32 and 33. 32 is the last time you do work, and then when you get to 33, you get to enjoy and bask in the glory.
It's a
So,
master number.
oh, absolutely. So the thing with Ophiuchus, I'll talk about this first, is that the sun moves through what's called the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the path of the sun across the sky over the course of the year. And the reason we have the 12 zodiac signs is because the sun passes through those 12 signs, which means I think it's within 11 degrees or something like that of the ecliptic. All of the main signs of the zodiac occur within that small bracket. So it technically also goes through Ophiuchus, which is between Scorpio and Sagittarius. But the thing about it, and this is coming from me because I couldn't find good answers. So I'm looking online. I'm like, all right, what do people think about it? What do I feel about it? And the thing about it is that it does go through Ophiuchus, but it goes through the very bottom of the constellation, where the main stars of Ophiuchus are nowhere near where the sun when the sun passes through Ophiuchus, the main stars of Ophiuchus are nowhere near where it passes through. The closest main stars that it passes through are actually the stars of Scorpio. So what I say is that the influence is still coming from Scorpio because the stars are very close to that, and the stars of Ophiuchus are way off on the other side. So it does technically go through it, but the influence is coming from Scorpio because those main stars are much closer to the ecliptic than the stars of Ophiuchus, if that makes any sense. The topic of the 13 moon calendar. This one's extremely important. Um, there's some argument. It's actually a good argument that it's more accurate to have a 13-month calendar than a 12-month calendar. And I don't have my calculator in front of me, but if you multiply 13 times 30, you get very close to the length of the year. Is it 13 times? Excuse me, that's not correct. 13 times 27, I believe, or 28. That's what I meant to say. So if you multiply those numbers, you're going to get really close to I think it's 364 if I'm not mistaken. It's like right in there. And the reason that I think is more accurate is because the month, and even the word month, is based on the word moon. Mon and moon, it's the same word essentially. So in the length of the moon cycles between, I believe, 27 and 29 days. It's somewhere right in there. And it might even vary a little bit depending on conditions. But the point of that is that, well, you want to get your subunit, the month, which is the subunit of the year. It's technically really not based on 30. I mean, it's based on the moon cycle. So
Right.
you can get there either way using 12 months or 13 months, but but it's they're both accurate to me because 12 also, that's the master number of the zodiac, really. So you have to, it's this thing where it's oscillating back. It's a really weird thing, Trish. Even with the ages, they say that every uh well, let's see, it's every 6,500 years or so there's a cataclysm that happens, apocalyptic
Hmm.
event, things are reset, whether it's with a water or fire or wind destroying things. But when you add that up, you actually end up with you end up with 13 or 13,000 year, which is half of the great year cycle. The total length is 25,920. So the thing about that is, even with the great cycle, it's oscillating back and forth between 12 and 13. And I can watch it and I just see it moving back and forth like that. It's just amazing. It's amazing. So I say it's both. You just have to know how to define it.
Well, and a lot of other things play into it as well, as far as like leap years. You know,
Mm-hmm.
our our basis, I guess, our concept of time is very simplistic. I
Oh
guess
yeah.
in the as far as the bigger picture goes, because if you actually started breaking down, the amount of time that is gained or lost during different times of the year or different moon cycles, things like that, of days, then it wouldn't come out to be the exact same number every year. And so,
Yeah.
um, it's kind of like biorhythms. In biorhythm, it never made sense to me that everything was like 30-day challenges for things, or 30 days, in hypnosis, like to a different mindset, things like that. It actually takes the human brain
Mm-hmm.
33 days to actually even grasp the concept of like habitual change. I see that a lot in fitness too. And so the fact that there is not a month that has 33 days, you would have to go into the next one, obviously, the next cycle, essentially,
Yeah.
um, to complete that. So it's like we're constantly as humans, and maybe I've been thinking it's funny. Well, of course we would talk about something that we've both been thinking of, because
Oh yeah.
I uh I was thinking about this last week though. I'm like, that's why humans in general and the earth itself keeps repeating all of these cycles, because we're literally and this came up because I was supposed to run a marathon last week, and I was thinking about it, and I thought about the last time. I'm a terrible runner. Like, I don't run.
Okay. Yeah.
I and so I was thinking about the last time I did, and I was a short distance runner, when I was younger. And then all of a sudden they needed someone for this relay, and I got to the end of the but I exerted all of my energy, just like we do during the day or during the year. And here we are at the 12th month. I exerted all of my energy at the beginning of the race because I wasn't used to being a long distance runner. And I literally fell right before the baton handoff at the end of the race. And that reminded me of how we do as humans and why we keep reliving all of these things over and over and over, because we're literally getting to the end of the race and we quit right before the finish line because we don't know any different. We don't know that we need that last we need that 13th month to get over the year. And it's that was an interesting I was like, that's why we always that's why we're
Yeah.
reliving all these things over and over and over, because we're not finishing the race. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that what I would say from my perspective, we're also not really understanding um, the quantum field very well. We're
Mm-mm.
missing the boat on that one. And
At all.
oh right, yeah. But the ancient Indians, they did. And then you got modern physicists coming out saying like, "Oh, this is the theory, guys. This is what we think." I'm like, I don't care what you think because the Hindus already knew it. You want to
Mm-hmm.
read their texts, guys? It's actually in their texts, and they're very comfortable. Even Native American tribes very comfortable talking about portals and quantum physics and all these things.
Yes.
Why is it so hard for the mainstream? And it might be a control mechanism thing. And it's also ignorance, I think. Um, but the thing about the human body, and you'd mentioned earlier that we don't realize how much power we have. Well, back in the beginning, in ancient Egypt, maybe even pre-ancient Egypt or pre-Pharaoh, they were teaching the real ascension teachings. By the time you had mummies and stuff like that, they were already missing the point. I mean, I'll argue that one to death because no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. But the point is that they're saying, oh, let's put the oil and the salts, let's put it on the outside of the body after the person's died. Let's remove the organs and all this stuff, and they'll one day reunite with their body. Well, last time I checked, I'm not trying to be offensive, but the last time I checked, when you go into an Egyptian tomb, there's still a body there, and it's in decomposition. So to me, it doesn't seem like that worked out too well. Now, maybe it's a different timeline. Maybe they're waiting for the future. But the original teaching, and I'll hang my hat on this for the rest of my time on the planet, is actually about the oils on the inside of the body and the salts on the inside of the body. And that is called Ayurvedic medicine, which is
Mm-hmm.
based out of ancient India. So everything almost everything literally that is in the Western world for me is like a rehash, or it's like a misunderstanding of the actual original teachings, which I am
Yes.
100% confident that ancient India still has intact if you know how to look for it. So the point I'm trying to make is that the human body is designed for ascension. Before the Christian narrative of Jesus came up, and I'll just put it out there, I actually believe Jesus was actually a real person, but in possibly different dimensions and timelines and perspectives and things. That's all on the table. But the original teaching was always, even before Jesus was here, was always that you have to save yourself. You have to do it. You have to do the work. You have to make the
Yeah.
moral decisions. You have to improve your energy in your body. You have to improve the clarity of your
Oh yeah.
body. And that happens through the principles of Ayurvedic medicine, which is fasting, circulating your fluids,
Mm-hmm.
and getting the oils back into your organs and the channels of your body. So that part, when I look around, since I teach, essentially the principles of Eastern medicine, or even pre-medicine, I would really call it. It's even simpler, is the fact that we're sitting here, waiting. Some people are actually waiting for a savior in the sky, and I'm not actually discounting that necessarily. I actually believe that's going to happen as well. But the point is that this is my firm belief. You don't get your freedom as a sovereign being until you're fully in control of your own energy grid in your body. Because
Uh-oh.
what that means is you don't actually need food coming in. You don't need outside
Mm-mm.
energy coming in. You produce your own energy through fusion. You actually become
Mm-hmm.
essentially a star, or a sun, which is why in Hollywood people are called stars all the time. And then that is a sovereign being. And now, since you don't need food, you don't need shelter, and you don't have a physical body anymore, you're free. You're actually free
Yeah.
because you increased your energy enough to get yourself out of the dimension. So that's the other part I'd add to that.
Well, and so and I have the same belief as far as like Jesus and everything. There's, I think each culture had their own version of like ascended masters of
Right? Yep.
healers and such that um because yes, I 100%, I mean nobody would believe this and I like without seeing it or but yes, I probably there's probably quite a few people that I know that could probably walk on water if they wanted to, or, you know, it would seem like they came back to life or they were all kinds of things. Like I've died 5 times in this life alone. You know what I mean? I was only resuscitated one of those. So artificially. Um, so there's so many, there's things that we just I mean, yes, I agree on I think it's a combination of both being, kind of a cover up due to power and other issues, religions, things like that. or just lack of knowledge, because we've we've come so far from where we began. And I started having dreams about where I grew up in New Mexico. It was just in the last few years they've discovered bones and artifacts and things from a tribe that was almost 30,000 years old. Now that's uh, one of the oldest to date that science has found um, in the world. And they 100% had kind of a, what is it, the animistic beliefs as far as the world went, that everything on this planet, everything in the universe for that matter, had this universal energy, which meant that they had to respect, even rocks and trees and everything like that. And so, and that makes sense if you consider um the earth, as you said, like the oils and salts and everything being within our bodies. Well, of course, my beliefs, as within, so without. So, the earth itself, as a living thing, an entire, you've got the core, you've got the water inside the earth, you've got the oils inside the earth, things like that. And then, of course, think of the ozone as like the earth's auric field, and once you break it down, where
Yeah.
people almost to like, it reminds me of that show that came out a long time ago, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Because once you break things down like that, it helps me as an adult. But when you break it down to other adults who've been looking at things in such a complicated manner, it's really very simple. Um, it makes a lot of sense. You say, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Why? And when you start thinking of atoms and things like that, instead of just the mass of a person, you're talking about how we can become essentially like stars. Yes, um, because we just see this as like a shell. So as far as, there was an interesting thing on Einstein I read recently, and that's obviously quantum physics and things like that. He was genius, far far beyond his time as far as the discoveries. All of those people back then, Tesla, not like the car people. I know there's going to be some out there. They're like, oh yeah.
There's a lot of controversy with both of those guys too.
Hmm.
I mean, Tesla was he was actually, I mean, I believe he was murdered, and then
Oh
all of
yeah.
his texts and documents were taken by some mysterious group of people.
Yeah.
But how about this? Okay, I'm just gonna put it out there. It's out there in all the stories. But he was killed on the 33rd floor, supposedly, of the building. So how was that organized? I mean, come on. We know, especially in 2022, we know how many people use that number, how many secret societies use that number. And then Einstein
Oh yeah.
supposedly was, and this is the first time I heard this was actually Santos Bonacci. If you guys want to hear more about Einstein, I'd go over to his page actually, because I don't do a lot with it. But
I have
supposedly
my
he
little
was.
bobblehead.
Oh, you got one, very nice. Yeah.
Uh,
So supposedly he was put in place to destroy some of the ancient traditions, and he was a thorn in the side of a lot of the ancient philosophers who actually knew what they were talking about. He might have actually been a prop. I'm not trying to be offensive to people, but
well,
again, when you
he was part of the Nazi, the scientists from
that's right, yep.
the so he had that affiliation, but not by choice necessarily. That's just what he did. But what I was going to say, that I never knew this. I never knew Einstein's brain. So he requested that his body, he died in mysterious circumstances as well, and he
Okay, yep.
requested that his body um, be cremated, which I think it was somebody like his brother, somebody close to him, ended up carrying out. But before they could do that, somebody else took his brain. Nobody knows who the original person that took his brain. They divided it up in 200 pieces, sliced up in 200 pieces, and shipped it off all over the world to different scientists. against Einstein's wishes, obviously, and against his family's
Hmm.
and everything else. Now, what's interesting about that, when I was reading about, you know, they're talking about sound, sonic weapons as, but also as healing. There's devices now that are out with machines that create different vibrations and such to heal a person's DNA. And this came about because I do a lot of research on as far as the Lyme disease and immune suppressant diseases and such.
That
So
actually happened really close to where I grew up, Trish, which is Lyme, Connecticut. So I know all about that
yeah.
story. There's a
So
the biological factory just off the coast of Connecticut where they were doing all kinds of experiments, and then suddenly Lyme disease appears right across the bay. I mean, come on! Like these are
yeah.
not hard things to put together. That doesn't just
And then
happen
they
like that.
moved that center to Kansas.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Like
that
a
part.
few 5 years. Yeah, they just built the nuclear biodefense center in Manhattan, Kansas, which actually probably shouldn't be within, I don't know, hundreds of miles of civilization, but here it is in the
Yeah.
heartland. Um, so that's the new Plum Island, basically, and so, but with Einstein, what I was going to say, his brain being spread across the world, and when you think about the sarcophagus of like Egyptian um, pharaohs and things like that. So this report said that they didn't need the actual body of a person, or even like say you wanted to heal yourself with one of these machines, you only need your DNA there. You don't have to physically be there to enable this machine based on the vibrations and such to heal you.
Wow. Okay.
So you could take a piece of like whatever, your DNA, your hair, anything, um and essentially go to work, do whatever. That's what this was advertising, and leave that there to heal you remotely. First of all, okay, all you witch hunters out there, isn't that essentially the same thing? Second of all,
Yeah.
I find that interesting because with all these mummies and stuff um, that are touring the world, that were buried in these tombs, and we take them out and we're digging up bodies of all of our ancestors and all these things just to study science. But the same with Einstein's brain, and this report got into why he didn't want his body. He wanted to make sure that this one person knew specifically to make sure that he was cremated. And I'm assuming that's why, because remotely you can manipulate anything, anyone for that matter, because it- and then that branches off to everyone a person's related to. So when I explain how people from the beginning of time can have the living, Christ gene, or um, v- various religions explain it a different way, but so when a mother is pregnant, I learned this because that's one of the times I flatlined was when I had my son. Not only does the mom pass healing cells to the fetus if needed, but the fetus can also um, exchange to the brain, directly to the brain, healing cells to the mother. Now, if you think about that, then that would live on forever as long as people are alive, because it would keep going on to the next one and the next one, and the so we're always connected in that way to everything. So if you get a person's DNA that has a bloodline and ancestry that goes back to the beginning of time, and you manipulate their DNA, it's going to affect every single person along that bloodline, which would be everyone.
Oh yeah, and the Earth grid too, because
Yeah.
everything that changes. I don't know if you probably. I'm sure you've noticed this too, Trish. But anytime a high-profile person dies, I feel a vacancy in the grid, and I feel it shift. Because their consciousness is not being put into the larger system anymore, and I know
Mhm.
that they're not there, and I'm aware of it. And then actually, that's when things usually that's often when you see things really shift, and a lot of times because if it was a positive influence of a person, well, it's like the chaperone has left the room, so now
Right.
the energy that's been trying to get in, now it can sometimes do that. And
So,
oh, good.
oh, I was gonna say that brings up what we were talking about, kind of before the show, as far as other now, you were talking about we're kind of seeing past the veil and being able to discern between good and evil as far as uh I guess spirits and extraterrestrials and things that could be a walk into human bodies. But what is your opinion of that on the future of other um outside influences, I guess?
Trying to come into human bodies, you're saying?
Well, trying to, if humans have finally secured maybe our um well, we're still on the risk of extinction either way, but if we finally secured um being able to discern between spirits and extraterrestrials and things like that influencing our bodies. But there's so many theories that, you know, plants are actually farming us, or that like there's the whole democratic human extinction um theory, that they're trying to make humans go extinct to save the world and things like that, or the machine base like AI taking over.
Yeah, definitely. Well, all that stuff is really coming into the limelight now. I mean, it's become very apparent. It's really obvious, even over the past like 3 years. It's just gotten.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, I get in terms of bot messages and stuff. Like, I actually ask the person, I'm like, look, I'm sorry, man, but I actually don't think you're a real person. So, and I'm not being disrespectful, but if you are, then I want you to prove that to me right now. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're not talking. Because you don't know who is on the other end, and most of the,
Right.
I actually think about half the time there's actually not a person there, and it's wasting my time. And it's also pissing me off, excuse my language. But it's like, look, I have things to do. I'm not gonna. It's not even a person. This is ridiculous. But the AI question, I think the battle between actually good and evil is largely AI driven, and some people think we're coming up on a resolution to that very soon. The pole shift. I know Frank Jacob is saying it's going to be in April. I'm not sure if he's still saying that, but it feels about right to me. We're about to go through another solstice, and then 8 days after that, we're going through part three of Pluto return. And I'll just remind people, this is for the Pluto return to the United States, which means the last time Pluto was in the position it's in now was when the United States was founded 248 years ago. It only happens once every 248 years, so no one on the Earth has seen this yet. And the thing about it is that it's kind of come in three parts this year. The first part was February 22nd, which 2 days after that, the war with Ukraine and Russia broke out, and I said it for like 4 weeks before that happened, Trish. And I'm like, guys, there's going to be a war. I'm sorry, okay, but you have to just get ready for it, and be in the right place, the right state of mind. And then July 11th was the second one. I don't know what that was because I was actually on the road. I wasn't paying attention to news stories and stuff. And then the third part three of Pluto return, which for me it kind of rounds it out. It kind of closes out the year, and it figuratively and actually is December 28th, which is 7 days after the equinox. So those get combined as if they're not powerful enough by themselves, which they are. So I can already feel I actually was started to feel the equinox about 4 days ago. It's called an orb, which means how many days on either side can you feel the influence of the solstice or the equinox or whatever you're looking at. I can feel it. I would say about probably maximum of about 2 weeks before the event happens. It doesn't get strong until about 7 days before. But as we're coming into it, I have not. I can't remember a month period. It's not even a month. It's probably 3 week period where I've been as busy with downloads coming in, talking to people, networking with people, doing shows, huge amounts of information coming in, things that I never thought, I didn't even think it was out in the grid to actually have access to. I didn't think it existed. And then suddenly all this stuff is coming in. A lot of this is related to these big events that are happening. It's also related to my chart, because it's not just what's happening in the sky at the moment, but it's what's in your birth chart, which is what you actually interact with every day when you interact with the world. You carry your own sky in your body. So that's the
Right.
first point of influence. Then it's what's out here. So what I'm trying to say is that it's going to be compounded. Once we pass the solstice, it's going to get, actually, believe it or not, it's going to get even more intense, and it's going to continue to ramp up until the 28th, and then, I mean, for a minimum of another 7 days after that. We're talking like January 5th or 6th, which also happens to be essentially right in the middle of Capricorn. So none of these things are random, and what I say is that when the Earth time clock was created at the beginning, I guess at the beginning of time, whenever that was, it was created to basically do things at certain times. And for me, when I watch the time cycles move through time cycles and different ages and stuff like that, all I'm really seeing is that whatever intelligent race created the Earth and created humans and created all this, the system, I'll put it that way, all they had to do was, once they finished with the organization, it's basically like it's kind of like playing Legos almost. It's like, okay, so we're gonna create the house here, and we're gonna make the little people, and we'll put them out front. We'll put the plants in the front, stuff like that, and then they just stand back and let people enjoy it. It's kind of similar. It's that the system has been created. It's multi-dimensional. It's fractal in many ways, so it's not as confining as it sounds. It's actually, you actually have a lot more freedom than it sounds like, but that depends on your own energy, what things you're picking up on. But the point of this is that they basically press play and then they just watch, because they already did
Yeah.
all the work. They already knew that Pluto was going to be where it is on the 28th of December in 2022, and that was the first Pluto return to the United States. They knew that. It's all been set. It's all been set into motion. But don't ever give up your free will. Don't ever not pay attention to what your heart is saying. You want to follow your objective for this planet. I think it's important to try to get that established for everyone. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I doing? And stay focused on that, and you're going to be okay. This is not the only life. We keep going.
Well, and like the Egyptians taught us, it you can't stop things from happening. I always, even when that's the terrible thing about being psychic, or even when you get into subjects like um artificial resuscitation and abortion and things like that. There's
Yeah.
a big reason that and the only people that would probably say this are those that have probably actually died before and been brought back to life, because then I have had to relive certain things that happened up until that point over and over and over, because I was supposed to die then. I mean, so it's like hacking. It's a universal law thing, and
Hmm.
believe me, that when the more times you bring someone back, it's literally like. And I thought about this because I had some cut roses, and I was giving them. They always send you from like floral shops and stuff, that fertilizer stuff. It's supposed to keep them looking alive longer and like fresh and stuff, but they're cut, like they're gonna die. They're like, but here
Sure.
we
Yeah.
are just feeding a you know what I mean? And that made me think about that. I'm like, that's not really doing anyone service to and the same with abortion. And regardless of a person's moral or religious or whatever thoughts about it, um it's it interrupts the universal law. And I cannot emphasize enough how much that affects a bloodline. I mean, generations. Or, people say, well, what if that child would have had um, a better life, or wouldn't have had a life, or what if they're doing whatever a person's arguments, to each their own. But I'm saying is there's things that aren't being considered when you think about that. When you think about maybe that was that specific generation's karma, maybe
Oh yeah.
whatever happens, and people don't think about that because I promise you, like I've realized in my own ancestry, my own bloodline, things happen um, to me on the exact same day in the exact same fashion that happened to one of my ancestors. Um, and so we're interrupting a lot of that by the same with like vaccines and stuff. And yes, I've had them like we as humans we only know what we know until we know differently, so a lot of times we don't understand. And that's what Nikola Tesla and Einstein and people like that, even Edgar Allan Poe died mysteriously for his, and his writings obviously were far beyond his time. Most people nowadays can't even comprehend what he wrote. um but that's the danger of those things, is that we don't realize the damage we're doing until 100 years later. you know we don't to anything, to the earth, with AI, with any of that. All of those people back then, and look at all of the studies, even with the government, were way back in the 60s. They even had, cell phone, um, different, already being invented, and things, and people can't, that blows people's mind in modern times, thinking that no, no, that's impossible. That they know, they wouldn't they have told us? Wouldn't somebody have told us? Wouldn't we have learned that? No. Um, and that's why na- by the time everybody caught on, it's too late. It's too late. I mean, it's not too late to going back to what you say. There's no one coming to save us. You got to save yourself. It doesn't matter. There's no secret pill. There's no secret like fountain of youth, nothing, unless you raise your own vibration.
Yeah,
That's why
you're
people
right.
get cancer over and over and over, and they're healed
Yeah.
from it, and then they get it again. Um, Things like that. It doesn't matter. There's nobody is immune from the obstacles of life. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting too because I was vehemently opposed in the beginning to a savior coming on the clouds. I know a lot of people, joke about that, say, "Oh, yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing." However, I've since what basically, and again, this is things that have been shown to me directly through revelation, through visions, through my research, through being on the road, through other people, is that the story that I feel is actually coming into prominence right now is the ancient stories from the Bible, and specifically the Book of Revelation. The
Hmm.
very weird thing, because it's not something I would ever have chosen to say, "Oh, I want to do this," or "This makes sense to me," or whatever. I'm actually I'm getting pieces of information that is indicating that I think what we're going into is related to that story. And of course, like you were talking about, things don't disappear until there's a resolution, whether it's in your life or
Right.
whether it's in the larger cycles of Earth time or whatever. It will keep coming back, and it's a big cycle. But the thing for me, actually, I want to talk about Jesus for a minute because this is a very interesting character in history. The first thing I want to say about it is that he was supposed to have been born at the beginning of the age of Pisces. And the thing that's important about that is there's a reason he's associated with the fish. There's also a reason he's associated with the loaves, the fish and the loaves, because the loaves is Virgo, which is opposite to Pisces. So this is also an astrological story. But the thing about it is that he came in at the beginning of the age of Pisces. I believe that was and is currently the supervisor for the Earth. So he is in my belief, one of the 12 ascended masters. There's one ascended master per sign of the zodiac, which means one ascended master per age of the zodiac, and each age is 2,160 years. And he even said, we have the text in the Bible, he said, "I will be with you until the end of the age." Now that's not a random reference to me. He's being to me that's a literal statement. The end of the age of Pisces, which means that he's going to pass the torch on to the new supervisor for the Earth system, who is the ascended master of Aquarius, which is what we're going into. So in terms of these stories coming in, there's so many other references. Look for the, I believe it was said, Jesus said, look for the man with the water pitchers on his shoulder. I mean, come on, that is Aquarius, guys. That is Aquarius. That's how he's depicted, with the water on the shoulder. So he was already preparing people for the transition between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius, way back when he was still here. Again, that's if people believe he was here. But the thing about it is that I believe that, I'll put it this way, you're not going to, this is my firm belief, you're not going to get your freedom from the Earth system until you harness the power of your own energy. Your own energy
Right.
field, you have to lift yourself. You have to lift it yourself. And there are ways to do that. There's science behind it. But I also believe that when these ascended masters come to the Earth, they do change the structure of the Earth, which includes the entire etheric grid, the sun, gravity, density, all this stuff. It actually will shift, I believe, per the age that you're in. So, I don't think that it's going to be an extinction event. But what I think it is that the focus is essentially is machines and technology and AI and all this stuff, which is firmly in the realm of Aquarius. That stuff is not Pisces at all. That is not Pisces material. That's Aquarius material. The space race, Aquarius. The being as a culture being quirky and having these one-liners and stuff like that. It's not really Pisces. That's Aquarius. So when you see the culture being influenced by that, and you see the signs, I mean, that was even said in the Bible too. Look for the signs. Look for the signs. They'll be in the heavens. Um, it's trying to indicate stuff, and we are transitioning. But I think that what people should keep in mind is that it may be both. There may be a savior, there may be a new savior coming in, who I would call an ascended master, a different ascended master from Jesus. And the thing about it is that will change the system. The fact that ascended being comes into the Earth grid, integrates their consciousness with the Earth grid, will instantly change the Earth grid. That's the first part. But you're still not going to be miraculously saved. It may get
Right.
easier. It may get easier. It may be more convenient. Maybe we have free energy or something like that. But I still believe there's going to be like a natural expiration of life. You live 100 years or 120 years and then you die. But if you're tired of the whole thing, you don't want to play any of the game anymore, then I would go to the ancient Indian teachings about ascension, which is, you can read the text, guys. It's online. It's actually free online, called the Sushruta Samhita, Sushruta space Samhita. And that's the book that Ayurvedic medicine is based off of. And it was written down, I mean, I don't know if it was 1,000 BC or something like that. I could be a little bit off, but before it was written down, I guarantee it was already in place in an oral tradition for many thousands of years before that. These things don't just miraculously appear out of nowhere. These huge volumes of knowledge about medicine and the body. So I think it's wise to not jump to conclusions too fast about the mythologies from the Bible and from some of the other religious texts about who these figures were, because people might be shocked and or surprised or both when there is someone who comes, there is a savior that comes and changes the grid, changes the earth grid, but still the message is continued that you're still responsible for your development. I'm not going to, it's the most ridiculous thing to assume that, oh yeah, someone's going to do it, all of it for us. Well, you know what,
Right.
maybe that person comes down and they look at you and they're like, you're not really making effort. So I'm not actually going to extend my hand to you because I don't see that you want that. I don't see you're willing to put in the work. So we go through these cycles, and there's different backdrops almost that humans are able to work with, but it's always going to be that you have to save yourself. It's about you deciding where you stand, what energies are appropriate and acceptable for you, and where your energy is going towards. Is it going towards love and kindness, or is it going towards greed and envy? I mean, that is 100% your choice. That is absolutely your choice. So if you're by your actions in your heart, if you're saying, no, I value the greed and envy stuff more, then you're creating your destiny yourself. If that's the stuff you like, then you can't expect it's going to be like nice and perfect and pleasant and stuff like that, because I
Yeah.
would argue it's going contrary to cosmic law. And cosmic law for me states that it's all about love and kindness and caring for each other, generosity, understanding, truth. Those are eternal principles to me, Trish.
Well, when I started this show, and people always ask me, they're like, "Well, as a medium, and as being on a network full of paranormal and supernatural and things like that, my show, I kind of made more of a variety kind of talk show, because I wanted to also mostly bring on people who had either transform themselves in their lives through terrible situations, and they're doing something for the greater of humanity now and helping other people. And I've had tons of people like that, and healers and spiritualists and things like that. And people always ask me, well, if you're a medium and you're capable of communicating with the dead, why don't you all the time? Okay, but exactly what you just said. most While most human spirits that are lost are obviously lower vibration, but anything else in the ether that is not a human spirit, that is n- almost 100% of the time, it is a lower level entity that was never a human, and vibrates at a much, much lower frequency than I do. And so I warn people in the paranormal investigation fields and such that you have to take a break from it once in a while. You have to, I mean, it's okay to do those things. I probably do like one investigation now about every quarter, I would say. So like 4 a year, because I have to lower my frequency
Yeah.
to meet theirs, to communicate with these lower vibrational beings. And I always tell my kids and stuff, think of yourself in the same manner. Who are you surrounding yourself with? What environment are you surrounding yourself with? What friends? What
Right. Yep.
things like that? Because that absolutely affects your frequency. And I realize, like, especially with the economy and everything in this day and age, that people can't always help, with their jobs or things like that. But there are so many things that you could do to raise your frequency too. Just singing or petting an animal or grounding yourself, but no, we're not taught any of those things. We're not taught any of that. And the scary thing about the AI, well, first of all, they're battery operated, and they don't have a source of their own generated power like humans. Like, we could, like you said, essentially live without food or water or things like that. I've actually I don't recommend this people ever, but it was a test when I started neuro linguistic programming to see if I could rewrite a script coding in my own brain and stuff and still be healthy and fully functioning on less sleep. And I looked at my statistics over almost the last year. I get 4 hours of sleep a night, and I do a lot in a day. And there's still not enough hours in a day. And most people would look at me and be like, how do you function on 4 hours of sleep? No, I don't do drugs. I don't even take supplements anymore. Again, we are fully equipped when we are born with everything we need. So you adjust your diet, you adjust it's like a recipe. You literally devote blocks of your time in this life to your mental,
Yeah.
physical, and emotional and spiritual health, and divide that out evenly and be balanced, and that's it. Like, there are no games, there's no secret. Bad things still happen to me all the time, but at least now I don't let them, completely destroy me. But if I'm around spirits all the time and going into haunted places and doing things like that, no, that brings I'll start getting sick. I'll start,
Yep.
things that don't normally happen, because that's what I'm allowing. That's what I'm And so you see investigators having heart attacks and strokes and like injuries and all kinds of stuff, because that's 100% their focus. And it's okay to do things like that, but the rest of the time, go do the historical research. Go, um, you know, try to find the more positive side of stories, because it, and I was thinking like the we have the global ghost hunt going on next year, which is going to be people all over the world doing it all on the same day, and there's things that um it reminds me of like a Ghostbusters movie that where the people are actually, what if it's not like, what if it doesn't even influence the spirits, but what if collectively all those live people, that's what I'm more afraid of, is all of their energy at once focusing on something lower vibrational. What's that going to do to the
Yeah,
world? All at the same time, harnessing that power. I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely,
that's
absolutely. Well, it's the same thing with when you got the monks gathering to pray together,
Mhm.
and you see that you read the news headline and oh my goodness, but hey, look what great thing just happened on 10,000 miles away. At the same time, by the way, that they were doing that meditation,
Yeah,
it does affect the grid. And actually, I think uh, one of Laura Lee Popvin's friends, of course, Angel Rock with Laura Lee Potvin on the network here. I was actually just on her show an hour before I joined you, Trish, and one of her friends, Augie Nost, I believe he talks about it being called the mastermind, where you get a bunch of people together and then it amplifies the energy,
yeah.
and then you're able to project that energy. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I'm also not going to be surprised when I see the date, the year, the time, and everything that event is happening, because I also believe that they're going to pick a time that's more conducive to that kind of energy that they're trying to transmit. So it's people
Well,
pick the dates as well.
and it's the same concept. So, especially in pagan and Wiccan communities, back I it was a few years ago. It was when the internet really started growing and everything, and YouTube and social media and such. And they had the whole baby witch, there was like a certain day or time or whatever that and it wasn't dark witches. Oh, okay. Well, first of all, let's get there's a difference between a dark witch and one that practices black magic. So there's certain ones that work with the dark part of the year, which is coming up on after December, around the 20th through the 22nd. Um, that's that's the darker part of the year. There's those. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to uh the ones back in the day who were more um like the sacrificial black magic type, and they all came together on a specific day, specific time. But the problem was these were all younger, I mean, it was literally like a bunch of teenagers um doing some Sabrina type shit they saw on TV, the newer Sabrina that deals with that. And that's dangerous because I don't care who it is, whether they're a witch or not, what their beliefs are. You get that many people, thoughts become things.
Oh
Thoughts
yeah.
can be curses. Thoughts can be black magic. So you get that many people who don't even realize their own power, have no idea what they're doing. And they put this giant organized collective curse out into the universe. It's going to do something. It's going to do something. It's the intention behind it, regardless of religion or anything else. And
Even for me too, Trish, even when it's me plus one other person, it's astonishing how much that, because we're gifted in the spiritual world, obviously. So when you get two people that can do that in a
mhm,
room with each other, even on the
right.
phone with each other, I've had, I don't know if I really shared this before. I'll just say it really quickly, but one of my friends in particular has really easy access to some of the darker realms, and when we get on the phone, if we bring up certain topics, I've heard voices come through the phone. That's not me or this person. And I said, "Did you hear that?" And they say, "Yeah, yeah. Someone else is here, or whatever." There's very few people that happens with me, and I basically just ignore it, because if you don't give it energy, it's just gonna generally, a lot of times, it will just go away, because
Right.
it knows that it can't feed off of your field or whatever. So like, and I watch Michelle sometimes on her show, Michelle DeRoche, and she it's funny a lot of times when she has an experience, she just said, yeah, she's like, yeah, I know you're here. You know, what's going on? What do you want? What's up? You can't phase people. You can't phase really conscious and aware people in
No.
situations in paranormal situations like that. They can try, and then they end up looking stupid, and then no one, I don't care if it's a human or a spirit, no one wants to feel foolish or stupid. So go ahead, guys, you can try, but it's not going to happen. Not here, not today, not with me.
And I say that all the, I knock on wood, I do say that. It's rare that they affect me nowadays, but there are times, and again, it's when my vibration's lowered, when my
Right,
frequency is lowered, when I'm feeding into the like drama and negativity in the world and things like that. And then absolutely there's 100% times that I'm just as susceptible as anyone else to becoming possessed or affected or manipulated by different spirits and things like dark entities and stuff. And the more powerful you are, and that's the problem with the that we don't teach these things. We don't teach spirituality in schools and stuff. That's the problem with that, because there are younger, very powerful individuals that have no idea what they're
hmm,
attracting. I mean, they're not even doing it on purpose. Good people and stuff, but these dark energies are. It's like a moth to a flame. Quite
oh
literally.
yeah,
Um, and we've talked about that before. Like there's kids opening up portals by accident, like I mean, just by their energy and things like that. And but they don't know that they're doing it. And they don't know how to stop it. They don't know how to control it. They don't.
right,
I
yeah.
didn't either. I didn't either until I was much older. Um, and I attracted a lot of dark things a lot of my life. Um, but it, I don't. I don't know what this. I mean, people
Well,
can teach their own kids, I guess.
oh yeah, and I can totally offer something here because the only time um, that they can, in my experience, that I've ever had an entity try to essentially mess with me um, is when my energy is low. And
Mhm.
you know what happened that day, Trish? I'll tell you exactly what happened. You had mentioned at the beginning of the show that, of course, even food can change your consciousness and your transmissions and your all this awareness and all this stuff. And it opens up different dimensions. It opens up other possibilities and other fields and everything. And the thing about that is that this particular day, this was actually one of the most extreme things that ever happened to me. It was in Massachusetts. I'll just say that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but Massachusetts is, I would say, possibly the most spiritually charged place in the country. It is
Really?
amazing how powerful, especially when you get kind of towards Boston and south of
Mhm.
Boston. I've never had experiences like I had there in my entire life. We do know that obviously part of it, there's been so much activity there. That's part of where the country started. So you got to figure all of these people coming through, they leave residual energy on the field. That's a big part of it. But on top of that, there's energy there that predates the Native Americans. There's
Oh,
stuff there
yeah.
that is so ancient. Some of it has been created, I actually believe, through potentially dark arts. There was obviously a question about the Salem witch trials and everything. I'm not going on one side of the argument or the other for that. But what I think a lot of that came from is the energy in the land. And when you
Mhm.
when you get a person coming in that's not able, and it's, believe me, it is very strong. So even some of the
Yeah.
strongest people, for instance, like myself going into that situation, I felt it trying to mess with me. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, not today. But guess what? It was, I mean, 20, 30,000 year old spirit or something like that. That's what it felt like to me. You know what I mean? And I might consider myself old. I'm not sure if I'm quite that old. So the point is that, well, hey, even if someone's good, there are some beings out there who are even more powerful than that.
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
what happened. That's what happened. It's only once in my life this has happened. It was in Massachusetts. And the thing about it, that's the last thing I'll say about it, Trish. The thing about it was that right before it happened, I actually ate a small amount of fish for my lunch. Now, fish is a very dense material when it goes into the body. It's, I consider it a meat, essentially. It's similar, the protein structure, the density of the molecules and everything. It's not a light food, it's a heavy food. So when that goes into the body, It cuts some. It's depending on your state of health. It can cut some of the currents. It can make you tired. And at
Mhm.
that point, if it drops your vibration enough, now the entity that's been waiting for that moment for maybe hundreds of years, they say, "Oh, they've been watching and waiting, and now I can get in." Like the 1 second when you're at your lowest, they're
Oh,
waiting.
yeah.
You know?
Demons have all the time. They have all the time in the world, 100 years isn't it
Right.
that's like 5 minutes to them, so they're just
Exactly. Exactly right.
but
Yeah,
you
for sure.
mentioned
So,
there, if you study the witch trials even, they talk about the food. They say now scientifically, a lot of them may have been affected by a certain it was like a little bug that had in like taken over their wheat fields or something. It's a really
oh
strange
yeah,
and then that literally affected their brains. Well,
you,
again, back to the Bible, many of the well, even in paranormal world, infestations of any type of pests, things like that are often dark and demonic because bugs actually, and I've told this to people so many times, I'm like, it's not actually, if you have a bunch of spiders in your house, if you have a bunch of flies, whatever, yes, they carry germs and diseases, but they're not actually the bad thing. They're just attracted to then they absorb negative energy.
yeah.
So it's not the bugs themselves that are doing something bad. It's whatever's that means you have something bigger to worry about,
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. I have. I mean, it was like probably last week. I was basically getting ready for bed, and I felt it. I had the light out. I was almost falling asleep, and I felt something crawling on my hand. And sometimes I'm actually even not even sure, Trish, because I feel energy in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes I'm like, okay, is that me or is that actually something on my hand?
I get
So
that, yeah.
yeah, so I
All the
basically
time.
right. So I didn't exactly. So I didn't want to get up and turn my light on, so I used the light from my phone, and there was actually a fairly large spider on my hand. And I actually often sleep fairly close to the floor because I like the grounding effect and I like how it's more solid, for your back and everything like that. So yeah, I wasn't off the floor. I wasn't that far off the floor. But the point is, the only night that happened was that one night when I had, not as high energy because they come in, they're drawn to that. I don't hold it against the insect at all. It's the same thing with the flies and mosquitoes. If my energy is good, guess what? They're not even I don't even see them. I don't see them, I don't hear them. The minute it goes down, suddenly I'm being attacked by mosquitoes. I can be walking through this actually happened to me when I used to live up in Alaska. There's a lot of mosquitoes. There's a lot of standing water, and it's really untapped environment. So there's a lot of natural life thriving. And and this was the very beginning when I started to kind of notice some of the stuff in terms of how energy attracts different things. But I'm walking through the woods pretty much every day. I'm wondering. I'm like, where are all the bugs and stuff? Where's all the mosquitoes? I didn't see them in the air. I didn't hear nothing. And then again, the one day that I didn't know this at the time, and I don't remember what I ate. I know it was based on food. A lot of things are based on food, but it was that one day, and suddenly I'm standing at the pond, and there's literally, I looked, there were probably 30 mosquitoes on just my jacket. The most I've ever had in my life, just sitting on my jacket, and they can bite through your jacket too. I mean, they're really good at what they do. But again, it's just that one day, just the one day. So we are in charge of our energetic field, and there are a lot of things that you can do, and I hope this is what we're moving into start to teach kids about the principles of energy, about metaphysics, about stuff like this. And if the kid doesn't like it, no problem. But you know what? I needed this information when I was probably like 12, and I
Oh,
didn't get it
shoot,
till I
yeah, I
was
needed it when I
probably
was,
20.
like, 3.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But I didn't get it till I was like maybe what 25. I mean, come on. So when I look back at my education, I'm like, that was pretty much mostly a waste. I who was available to talk about astrology? To tell me that no,
Yeah.
it is actually science. People are doing a really bad job, Dave, but like we want to teach it to you correctly. Well, you know who that person is now? That's me. And that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing. One of the things I'm doing, I'm going to be that. I want people to come to me for astrology if you don't get it, or if you want it to be simple, and if you want to see it done correctly and responsibly, because I only do it to help people. I never take information, but believe me, I could easily take the information and say, oh, how can I mess with this person today? I know exactly what to do. And what happened, Trish, too, is that some people, throughout all time, really, I guess, they took that knowledge, and then because of them, not because of astrology, this is not because of astrology, it's because of them and their spirit and what they believe. They took it and they performed dark arts with it. And, the
Mm.
spells and all this stuff, they knew when to do things on which days with the moon and all this stuff and herbs and
Yeah.
things. And the other thing, so it's a person, is what I'm trying to say. It's not the science. And the other thing I want to say while I'm talking about plants is what you were talking about with that bug. And one of the things that I saw on Ancient Aliens, and again, Joe was on the show a couple times, I think, through the years.
Mhm.
And on Ancient Aliens, one of the episodes was talking about the bubonic plague, or the Black Plague in Europe. And the thing about it was that, and again, never heard this, was not in the textbooks. Of course, they're not going to teach kids this part of the story, what I'm going to share with people. But supposedly there was a Grim Reaper figure. That's maybe potentially where that originates from, that time period, in the wheat fields. And supposedly he was spraying the plants with, I don't know if it was with his Sith, or I don't know what it was, or there was some people had described there's a mist coming out associated with this figure. And by the way, that's also been observed with craft before too. That craft come down
Mhm.
low over fields and they'll spray everything, and then
Okay.
suddenly you have these diseases popping up. Okay, well, that doesn't sound like a natural process to me. It sounds like
It's like
intervention.
chemtrails here in
Yeah, yeah.
Kansas. Um,
Yeah, it's exact. In fact, that's exactly what it is. The other thing
yeah.
that I've heard about that is that there's often metal being sprayed down on the plants to change the soil
Well,
to poison
there's
the plants
metal
and
in our
stuff.
food. There's
Yeah,
people, if people with one of the first things I did intuitively, I didn't even know I was doing it. I didn't even know I had that much metal in my body. When I was told I was going to die of Lyme disease and, doctors couldn't help me, was to detox from metal. And you don't realize how much is in the water, is in the food, everything, is in your hair products and makeup and things like that. There's tons.
and
um
the petrochemicals too, Trish.
oh yeah. And
Should
that's
not
another
be in
thing
the
I was
body.
going to say. When I talk about food, and it has to do with, by the time, even water, now most people don't have fresh water. um And I'm not talking about like fresh from a well or from a spring, because if you live in a city, obviously you don't have access to that. But cities are, by the time our water gets to us, it's so filtered, even whether you drink bottled water or it comes from the tap. In a city, they put chlorine and treatment and all this stuff in it. So you're literally taking out the life force, the chi of the water, that energy of the water that actually keeps you healthy. And the same with foods. So if you if you can food at home, that's one thing. But I'm talking about like canned food in stores, or processed food, things like that. It's not as close to the source by the time you eat it. It's not even as, like, I try to eat a lot of fruit and vegetables and stuff, but even then, if it comes, I'm here in Kansas, and if it comes from California or somewhere like Mexico or somewhere far from, then by the time it gets to me, it is already far from the source. So we do have to work harder. Again, unless you do it yourself and you grow your own vegetables, and I do during the different times of year. I've been getting into that as well, because then what's in it, and you're literally getting it as fresh as it can be. Freezing things is about the healthiest, because they don't use all the preservatives and stuff. But
Hmm.
it's literally like giving blood, and they put the plasma back in your body. They just took the life force out of that blood. You know what I mean? Like, that's your chi. So it's the same with food. And
I just had that thought too today, Trish. I'm like, I was just thinking about frozen food today. I'm like, I mean, I'm not surprised at all because we think very similarly in a lot of ways. Part of the reason for that is because I have a lot of Gemini in my chart, So I know how to look between signs. I know how to look at both angles, not be biased and stuff like that. But that was my thought today, is this afternoon. I'm like, you know what? How about like we just don't put the stuff in the food that you can't pronounce, you don't know what it is, you shouldn't have
Yeah.
to look it up. That's ridiculous. I mean, if I look at it, I'm like, no, you know what? How about just just list beet? This is a beet right here. There's nothing else
Hmm.
in it at all.
Yeah.
And you know what? If the argument is, oh, we got to add stuff to make it keep it preserved, then what you do is you just, not all the time, because the ice crystals can destroy some of the tissues and stuff. But the
Yeah.
general idea for me is that there's two options here. If it's not going to last because it's a natural product, which is actually a good thing, then just eat it before it goes bad. If it
Right.
goes bad, put it outside and have it composted, which is going to help the environment. And if not, you can't do either of those two things. If you can freeze it, that will preserve it. It might
Hmm.
destroy the tissues a little bit, but for meats and stuff, it's no problem for like a year or two.
Even fruits that you buy in the store, it's but if it's especially if it's something like I love cherries are so good for you. They have so many different healing qualities, but they're not always in season everywhere. And if they're not in season, they're really expensive, fresh, obviously, because of the transporting them and stuff. But when they're flash frozen, one, they're less expensive, but they don't put all of those. Most of the time, I mean, you have to check the brand, but most of the time, there aren't any preservatives or anything. It'll say like the fruit and then water, and so that's the easier way. But another thing I was going to say, um, when I went back to kind of a paleo diet, um, if you just eat things that like nature did that, there's a reason. It's not by default, it's by design. Like that we're supposed to eat certain things during certain parts of the year. So if you eat food seasonally, like right now, for instance, pomegranates are in season. That's a winter fruit. Pomegranates have higher vitamin C, and sweet potatoes. You can get almost your entire amount of daily vitamin C from from a sweet potato, and that's good during the winter because there's less sun, so we get less vitamin D, things like that. So there's a reason, and those fruits and vegetables are more readily available. Potatoes are root vegetables. That's closer to the source. They're in the ground. Again, you do have to be careful because then there's metal in some of them. And now I read there's all kinds of like China, they had this thing about organic fruits and vegetables being fake from there. Like they're literally making lab created, I don't even know what it's out of. It's like plant
Yeah,
proteins that are actually dangerous for your brain. Dyeing them green and calling it a pea. Like that's how
yeah,
messed up. Like why why do we need to do that? I've seen them put color in things that are clear. What why? Why do you need to color
yeah.
something that's clear? Like it doesn't make sense. But again, it's another method of control. It eats away at your brain. It's the same with like the fluoride in the water and everything. Um,
I had some canned fruit the other day, and well, I had two actually. It was back to back. One was one day, one was the next day. The first one I had, it had actually so it's so absurd. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But it had Splenda in it, which is of course an artificial sweetener. It's not even a real thing. And I actually could not eat it, and I took the pieces, I think it was apricot. I took the pieces of apricot. I took a paper towel and I was trying to press out the fake sugar and stuff, and
hmm
I still couldn't eat it because it got all the way into the tissues of the fruit. And so that was the first day. So I had to throw it away or compost it. The second day, I had some canned fruit that was actually pretty good. It was, I think, pears, but they also added sugar to that. And it was, it's sugar again. A lot of things are genetically modified, but sugar by
hmm
itself is not necessarily always a bad thing. There are good parts about it sometimes, and depending on your body. But the thing is, I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, why do you need to put? I get it, the preservation factor. That's part of it. There's other things, but I probably don't even know about. But the point is that fruit essentially is sugar. It's
Right.
it's fruit, it's
Yeah.
fructose.
And you could use
Why are you adding
natural
sugar?
preservatives like citric acid or something. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah, citric acid specifically, that's not produced, because I think you can make that artificially too. But yeah, I mean, if you want to preserve something, like squeeze some lemon juice on it and then put it in a can, or put, with some, I don't know. There's lots of ways to do this.
Hmm.
Lots of ways. But I'm pretty encouraged too, because I feel like there's a small but maybe probably growing community of people that are really starting to get some of the basic stuff. And you can't tell. There's no corporation that's going to be like, one of the things is that you can't grow your own fruit, your own food, or something like this. That's going across the world right now. Are you kidding me, guys? Who If you're remotely intelligent, no one's going to buy that crap. No one. That's a right we have to come to this planet. You put a seed in the ground and it grows. And guess who's in charge of that? The sun.
And
It's on.
plants grow even in dirty water, so
Yeah,
there's
it's
no
amazing.
excuse. There's no
It's amazing.
excuse.
Yeah,
Like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, humans, we waste so much stuff. And one of the greatest pollutants right now, which I'm sure most people don't realize, is food. Um is food waste. There is so much that it puts harmful gases into the environment. Um but people will be standing there saying they're starving when somebody gives them a piece of fruit and there's seeds in the fruit and they just throw the seeds away. Well, okay, so you had, an apple or an orange or whatever, and it had seeds in it, and you ate it and you threw the seeds away and now you're hungry again.
yeah,
So save the seeds and plant them, you know, or I don't know why most places, there's other countries that do it, not a lot in the US, but um especially here, it's absurd to me because there's a lot of homeless people like in Topeka and stuff. And I thought about this last year because there were these people that had this beautiful apple tree and like a peach tree or something, and it was growing over their fence, and way too many. I mean, this thing had tons of apples just falling on the ground, nobody touching them. But every time somebody on the sidewalk side of the fence, like one of the homeless people, tried to eat one or whatever, the owners would call the cops on them. And I'm like, but you're just wasting all those apples.
yeah,
Like, why do you care if somebody eats one that's, one, not even in your yard anymore, and two, that's just going to be go to waste? Like, it's absurd to me that but these other countries have fruit trees on public land, that anybody just, you can just walk by and get them or whatever. It's whatever. um and the same with lawns. I thought about that. The like the botanic garden here, that, as I told you, that's one of my favorite places. But why do we need these manicured lawns? You could grow an entire herb garden and have it pest free and bug free and things like that, with everything you need to eat and heal yourself and your family.
yeah,
But you wouldn't have this wasted space of a manicured lawn, because what
yeah,
society says you need that for. What? You could be saving the butterflies and bees and everything else, with a different style garden. But we don't. We
yeah.
don't. We're like,
Oh yeah, and then of course once you've harvested everything, and I've worked agriculture before. I've worked really hard. I used to work in the tobacco fields in Connecticut when I grew up. And well, I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff too, because there was a lot of things sprayed on that should never even been created by a human being, fungicides and pesticides and all these things. But the thing is, here's the one good thing about it for me though, is that at the end of the season, everything gets cut down, and I know at least some of it just stays in the field. And then guess what? That fertilizes the soil
mhm,
partly. I mean, it's not going to last forever like that. You need to do crop rotation and things. But for the next year, and then when you get snow that falls on top of that, it compacts the organic material underneath it, and it makes soil. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I agree, Trish, 100%. And
It's like
actually,
people clean up leaves. They don't need to clean up leaves. They're there for a reason. The trees shed them for a reason.
yeah, oh
They're
yeah,
supposed to go back into the earth, just like people. We're supposed to go back into the earth, but we poison our bodies with cyanide, basically, to be put back in the earth to poison the earth. So
right,
it's because we don't know any better. Like, literally.
yeah. I say work with whatever the system, whatever the rules of the system are. Work with those rules, and it will help you. Instead of fighting
Mhm.
against it all the time. And it goes, of course, with astrology too, and the principles of Ayurvedic medicine, all this stuff. Maybe I don't love some of the stuff and how some of the things are in place. In fact, I definitely don't. Some of the things are absolutely irritating. But if I'm not working with the rules that are in place, then it's ridiculous because if I have the solutions and I'm just ignoring it, that's absolutely foolish of me to do that. Now, if I work with the system, meaning when I say system, I mean the natural Earth system. I'm not talking about any human organization. This is the Mother Earth, Mother Gaia. Um, she gives back. She gives back in abundance,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. You go on a walk, and even I've got some friends that live up in the far north of Canada, and they just the sun's out. You get out in the field. Yeah, it's cold, but you know what? It's beautiful, and the sun's shining there for you, and all the crystals are sparkling. The earth takes care of us, and I absolutely. You've heard the experiments too, where you say nice things to plants and they grow more, and you say
Oh
things that are
yeah.
not nice. It structures water, restructures water, like we were talking about even with the moon at the beginning of the show. But if you put good energy into the grid, then everything around you is much more likely to thrive. And when you're born, I mean, see, that's the thing. I guess there's some humans that are born with demons attached to them. I actually do believe that there are some, but I think the vast majority of humans, they come in just wanting what everyone wants, which is just to feel safe and happy and comfortable, and to have nice, clean food and water and things, have people that love them, and to have groups that they can get connected with. So that's the other thing too, is now when you start talking about religions, it's like, well, I was doing okay before I was forced to go to catechism. As a kid,
Yeah.
I was really happy. I was very happy. I played in the dirt. I was friends with the plants and animals around me. I stayed outside until I couldn't see anymore, like all year round. And then now you're saying, I'll use Christianity as an example, but I'm not picking one in particular. I'm just using it because I spent the most time with that tradition. Is that suddenly now you're telling the kid, well, you know what? You can enjoy the plants and animals and stuff, but like don't get too crazy with that because your savior is over here. Well, I felt like light pouring out of me as a kid before I was ever taught that. I didn't. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying it's not important or important for certain types of people, or if that's what you believe. I'm just saying that a kid doesn't really come into the world with that, and
No.
most of the kids seem very happy. They're very. I've watched, and I'm sure you have too. Well, I mean, you have kids, of course, Trish. But
Hmm.
the thing is like watch what a kid, even before the kid can even really talk. I've had kids like they had food and they just came over and gave me some of their food. I mean, it actually made me incredibly happy. I haven't felt that way for a really long time. And before that had happened, it doesn't even, but you know what? The natural instinct is I like you. I want to give you something that is meaningful to me and that it makes me feel good. I want to give that to you as well. And that doesn't, there's no religion in that. That is not
No.
nothing at all.
Well, and the funny thing is, we're born, the irony in the cycle of life, we're born with all the knowledge in the world. We're born with everything we need to know. But but we can't walk and we can't talk.
Right.
So we have so we can't exactly put it to use. And then by the time we're what, 4 years old is when a lot of that innate knowledge starts to be forgotten by kids. And then of course we're put in school where we're kind of molded by society and programmed by societal rules. And then we forget all of that. And then by the time we die and by the time we get older, we also lose our ability to think or walk or talk sometimes, people with Alzheimer's and stuff. And much less knowledge after living an entire life. Then we forget everything we learned in our life. So that it's essential. We have things backwards. The kids are that is the most essential time in learning for our future, for anything in humanity, is through the kids, you know, because that's going to shape the entire future, quite literally.
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely. We have to do a better job all around. But I feel, I mean, I'm doing more than my fair share to get this humanity to a better place. I have so much on my plate in terms of just trying to teach things properly, so so you can have seen it at least. Then after you have seen it, then you can decide if you like it or if you buy it or whatever. But if you're never presented with that option, then we have
Right.
a problem. I get really I mean I get really fired up about this one, Trish, because a lot of people don't understand why I'm saying that. It's because if it's not presented to you, it's not a fair playing field. If you withhold half
Yeah.
the information, and specifically if the half of that information is actually the vital part of the stuff you actually have to know, and you're not
Mhm.
even giving it as an option, there's something seriously wrong with that. We got serious problems with that.
And
You
that's
have to get the
basically
good
where
information out.
society's at. Unfortunately, I mean, through everything, through with technology and healthcare and schools and everything, I think, unfortunately. And the thing is, but it is important for people like us, as you said, once you do know the difference and have gone through the whole ego part and forgiving yourself that you didn't always do things right or know any better, then you go back for the others.
Definitely. Absolutely. I'll be here for humankind for the rest of my time on this planet. My mission statement is very clear. And actually, speaking of spirits, I always ask. Well, I'll say three things. Let's see how many there are when I start to list it. Basically, uh, it goes for a lot of times for specifically the ones I can't visually see in the visual spectrum. I want to know who you are. You got to first of all, tell me who you are. Tell me why you're here, and tell me what your vision is, essentially. And if I'm not cool with all three of those, then the shoulder gets turned. I'm not messing with that. You need to be upfront. And that's the thing, is that, see, the more evil spirits, they don't like those questions. They don't want to answer that
No.
stuff. But guess what? If you have a pure heart, there's no problem answering that. That's actually one of the best ways to be able to distinguish between the spirits. I've had a couple times, only a couple. I mean, a lot of the entities that I encounter are definitely lower energy than me, not necessarily caring about the principles that I care about. I have had a couple, though, where it absolutely blew me away. It was so beautiful, very good energy, and very calm and peaceful, and it inspired me to be a better person, even because and one by the way, Trish, I think you probably like this topic. I know we don't have a lot of time, but one of them was a fairy. It was actually a rock fairy, or a nature spirit. You can call it either one. Very, very tiny, very, very small. But it was made of ultraviolet light. I couldn't see it, but my camera saw it, and
Oh
unfortunately,
wow.
I did lose that picture. But the point is that it was the most brilliant, like purplish pink, fluorescent color outside of my visual spectrum. My camera saw it, and it was unmistakably. I saw the figure of the body and everything, and it was very. This one in particular was very kind of stick figure. But you can, as a spirit, ultimately you can appear however you want to appear. So there's nothing to say that you can't do it this way or whatever. The other one was on a mountain, actually, in the United States, in the southern United States, and the the being was actually, I don't know if I call it. It's hard to say exactly. It's hard to define this exactly, but essentially, it was inside of a rock. This is another rock spirit, and it was, I don't know how long it had been in there for, but I came up on the trail. I saw it there, and I said, of course, because I see, much like you, Trish, we see what's around us. We see the surroundings, we see the things, we sense the things that we can't necessarily see. But I saw the features, the general features of a face in this rock, and I said, okay, I know, I acknowledged what was there, and I said, there's something here for sure. And when I came back down the mountain, the sun had started to set. This was on my trip, actually. This was the very beginning of my trip,
Really?
and so, oh yeah, it's actually in Georgia. So what happened was I came back around, and of course I wanted to observe the rock again, just to share the energy and to see what's going on. I look back, and the light of the sun coming through actually the trees, which were in front of the rock, much in front of the rock, actually painted the rest of the face onto that rock. Because the first time I saw it, I just saw the brow ridges, up here, and I saw the general structure of the nose. But when the light came through, it painted the eyes in, it painted the mouth in. I could see the outline of the face. I think probably the only time in my life I've ever had that experience. And it was very special because I think a lot of these nature spirits are kind of in hiding right now because the earth is very volatile. It's not a very welcoming place in a lot of instances, and I think they feel very misunderstood and misrepresented. But basically, it was really surprised that I saw it there. And the first look was a look of surprise and kind of puzzlement because it might have been 1,000 years since the last time it was acknowledged. Most people are walking up that mountain, they're not looking. They don't even care. Which is a
Right.
problem for me. So I went up to it. That's the end of the story. I went up to it and I put my
You
hand over the figure and I said, it's going to be okay. We're coming into a better cycle here. I care about you. I acknowledge you. And it was a real special moment for me because, like I said, most of my encounters are with things that are not as good. Because maybe there's more of them here. I don't know. But the point is that, and that's actually maybe one of my closing points too, is that I want to say and reiterate that it's actually not that hard to be able to identify what kind of a spirit it is. If you feel good and happy and real and
Mhm.
also calm and relaxed, you shouldn't feel any manipulation at all for any reason at all. If there's
Yeah.
any manipulation, then I'm done with that. The true angels of light, the true ascended masters, they stand there full figured in full light, full disclosure. I'm here to help you. They state it. They state that I'm here because I like you and care about you. If you don't feel that stuff, it's not a good spirit. For me, it's very simple.
I was just gonna ask, you said that last one, that was in Georgia?
Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, it was
There's
in
Georgia's
Georgia.
got a lot of, um, that's where the Guidestones, are.
Oh, I went through that town. This is weird, Trish. I don't know if I told you this. I can't remember what we had talked about, but I went through the town where the Guidestones are. I was going to go there and visit it, and I passed through there I was less than 24 hours before they were destroyed.
Oh my goodness.
So I actually, if I had gone there that day, I would have seen them, but I didn't because I didn't have time, and I had to backtrack like 45 minutes the next day. And I come back there. Well, actually, one of my friends sent me a text that said the Guidestones were blown up, and I said I just passed that town. I actually, in terms of, let's say it this way, my energy was in the grid of that town where the Guidestones were, and then I couldn't see them because now it was taped off. Everything was closed off there. So when we pulled up there, there was everyone who was there was like, we know there's something that doesn't seem right here, guys, so don't try to play that off. I will say this though, that the police officers that were there, I've always personally had good interactions with police officers because I'm respectful and I believe that it's an important part of a stable society. You have to have a protection, and it's a hard job. But the thing is that apparently they didn't know too much about what happened. But what's weird about it is that there was like essentially no investigation. The stones were removed very fast, and nothing was ever said about it. In terms of that, you wouldn't you think that you'd want to see how did this happen? Was it what I heard was that, and I don't even know how this works. Okay, but I heard it was some kind of a ballistic missile that was attached to a tractor. It's farmland area, because of how the stone crumbled and collapsed when it hit the actual stone there.
The funny thing is, it was the day before, maybe the night before, I posted on I think it was like Instagram or something. I hardly ever post on those. And because I got this book at, I don't even know where it is, or I got it at a thrift store. And that night I had never opened the book. The book like falls off, a shelf or something. And this little replica, like this cardboard, or like cardstock paper, heavy paper, replica of the guide stones falls out of this book, and I'm like, well, that's
Wow. Okay.
and
Wow.
I took a picture of it and posted it on Instagram, because when I lived in Georgia, I never even realized that was there. That this was like 10 years ago, and and then it was the next day that they were destroyed. So it's interesting that and now all of a sudden, a lot of the things that were on the guidestones are coming true. So it makes you wonder.
Oh yeah. I've actually heard both sides. Some people have said that it was the so-called white hats that did it. The people who were trying to help humanity. The other side I've heard is that it was actually the people some of the more evil organizations on this earth, let me put it that way, the more nefarious groups and organizations, that they removed it themselves as some kind of a psyop or something of that nature.
Because it
You know,
had
I
numerous languages and, it wasn't just for one
yeah.
religion or one culture, one, race or anything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was in multi languages. It talks about, population control and all this stuff. All of these things, they're just so absurd to me, and it's not the world that I would have created when I was born here.
Mm-mm.
And so I spent my entire life trying to figure out how did we get to this point. And of course, that brought me down the roads of understanding the sciences, and human history and ancient history and all these things, metaphysics. But I just want I want a fair world, somewhere where it's actually fairly easy to exist and be happy, and you don't need excessive amounts of money just to live in a moderate size house. It is just ridiculous. We have so many resources, it's absurd. We should not be at this point still.
I agree. But if everybody does their part and does the work, then hopefully we can turn it around. But we have got it has been such a pleasure talking with you, Dave. As always, and I want to thank you again for coming on my show. I can't believe it's almost 10:20, but
I know, yeah.
um I tell everyone where they can, or where you would, which channel you would prefer they view your content or find you on.
Yeah, sure. The easiest way is probably Facebook. It's Dave Petrella on Facebook, Petrella. I'm also on Instagram, Dave Petrella 12. The number is 1 2 in terms of 12. That's how it's spelled. And then, the best way, honestly, well, if you want to send me messages, it's going to be those two. Of course, I provide full services in tropical astrology and birth charts, relationship matching, business applications, selecting, it's called electional, where you select days that are more successful for one or more people, like a wedding, for instance, would be a good example. And then I also I teach the principles of pre-Ayurvedic medicine, fasting, circulating fluids, health tips, and I also offer spiritual guidance. So if I can provide a service for you, definitely get in contact with me. Also, of course, if you just want to, send a message, I'm happy to respond to you as well for sure. And if you want to if you want to keep up with the content, I would actually send you over to my YouTube channel, which is Dave Petrella. It's the same. It's very easy to find. I put all of my podcasts and shows on there. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I do a show with my friend and co-host Karen Holton out of Alberta, Canada, twice a month. It's at the beginning of the month and at the end. The first episode, beginning of the month, we choose a topic and me and Karen talk about it. And at the end of the month, we actually have a guest on, a different guest every month to talk about what they're doing, how they're contributing to humanity and everything. So that one's
Nice.
on there. And then I also started my own casual podcast, which is just basically I invite people I want to talk to and I open up the conversation. Wherever it goes, I just want to build a community of people that we can trust and that we can work together, because I think we're the people who are going to be at some point making the decisions for humanity. I fully believe that we're not being brought to this point for nothing. We're forming a worldwide network of people who are really good at what they do, who care about other people, and are interested in truth. True information, good knowledge, humility, stuff like that. I just that my big message is let's just figure this out the best we can, and let's teach things properly, and everything's going to work. It's going to fall into place. But you have to be diligent with that. You have to stay focused.
Yes, focus is Victor Santiago. Hi, everyone from the Dawn Vic Show. Hello, Victor. Um, yes, I absolutely agree. Focus and just maintaining. I don't want to say hope, because hope is expecting, a specific outcome or to be rescued. So just positivity, I guess. Not giving up. Um, but
And
anyways,
visualization too. I think, Trish, keep it
oh
in
yes,
your mind's
yeah.
eye. Because that's creation.
And we, to the rest of you all in the world as well, thank you for sticking around this long and listening to us. I'm so thankful for all my listeners, and a lot of them have stayed this entire show. So thank you for
Awesome.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
And thank you again, Dave. Thanks, Carnation, for sponsoring me. Next week, super excited. I've got Jesse Peak coming from. He has his own podcast now, but also from MUFON. He is an investigator. That will be exciting. And then, of course, it will be the holidays. I think the following week. So here in the U.S. anyway. So. Um, Everyone, stay safe, stay positive, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Trish. Thanks, everyone.